What's going on, everybody? It's Brian Trippe. Welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Investing Live podcast, where we interview the very best real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and business leaders all throughout the country. And today, I'm excited to be joined by Mr. Shaun Young. How's it going today, Shaun?
Hey, everybody. Hey, Brian. Thanks for having me. It's going
Shaun
great.
is a wholesaler, a creative finance guy. He's just a real estate rock star who lives in Atlanta, Georgia. And Shaun, tell everybody what we're going to be talking about today.
Today, guys, we're going to be talking about virtual wholesaling and what's the easiest, best ways to get started doing just that.
Yeah. So, and Shaun, that's a great, I love that because a lot of folks who watch, our videos and listen to our podcast are newer. So I want to give some stuff today for the brand new person who hasn't done a deal yet. And I want to give some great information for the folks who are doing deals, but don't have a consistent business. So that's what I want to kind of focus on today. But Shaun, how do we get started? If I want to wholesale virtually, well, first, let me ask you this how we get started. Why virtual wholesale and not wholesale kind of traditionally the way we've always been taught of just, getting a list, maybe setting an appointment, going on that appointment, closing them then? Why virtual wholesaling? It seems like it might be harder.
Well, great question, Brian. In my opinion, and that's all this is my humble opinion, with virtual wholesaling, it opens you up. So you're not trapped to just your local market. You're not stuck to just driving for dollars or looking for deals in your local area. Let's say you live in a town that has 12,000 population. Do you feel like that would be enough for you to have a sustainable business if you just stuck in that town? I highly doubt it. So that's where you want to expand. You want to expand your search to other areas that have a higher population. A great key for me is we target cities that have at least 100,000 or more as being a viable city for virtual wholesaling.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that kind of begs the question. Like a lot of people say, start where you are. Mm-hmm. Get started where you are. You probably know your market. Start where your house is and start driving circles around, your neighborhood and things like that. True. There might be some people watching this that live kind of out in the country and live kind of far away from a bigger city, but it seems like it would be harder. And I don't know, cause I don't virtually wholesale and I got my start wholesaling kind of the traditional way. It's kind of funny to say that. To say traditional wholesaling, the
traditional way,
right? The normal wholesaling, but I never really got into the virtual because I'm more of a belly to belly guy. I want to look you in the eye, and I'm going to spend an hour at least on every appointment, building the know, like, and trust factor, and just having people buy into me because people do business with people they trust. It's hard to get that on the phone, and when you're not with somebody face to face, is it not?
Brian, I agree with that sentiment. And I tell you what, I come from a sales executive background. So my prior career before real estate, I was a sales executive traveling around the country selling high level products. And that's kind of one of the things that is taught is like, hey, belly to belly, get that warm interaction, develop rapport, look the person in the eye. But let me tell you what happened to me by default and how I by default fell into virtual wholesaling. It was here in my local market in Atlanta. And I had the horrible problem of having like 11 deals under contract at one time. Horrible problem, right? And so based upon that dynamic and my quick success, I figured I couldn't address everyone with just myself or by going to all these different appointments, taking pictures of all these different houses. So I said, you know what, I can get some help. I can get some folks to help me out and I can direct people to go and take pictures for me. I can direct people or have people delegate it, tasks for other folks to do things for me. So by default, by me delegating tasks in my local market and me not having to actually go see the property, me actually speak to the seller, I'm just helping the deal close through. I'm basically being a transaction coordinator throughout the process. It showed me that, hey, I can do this in other markets as well because I'm doing the same thing right down the street. The only difference is the distance from me to them, but it's the same transaction going on, the same principles. I'm not going to the closing. I'm not doing anything. I'm just coordinating the transaction.
Well, as a wholesaler who's not doing it virtually, really the only you can do aside from meeting the seller and getting the contract right then and there, there's really no other, but you don't even have to go to a closing. There's really
No,
everything else can be virtual.
absolutely.
As far as like, cause once it gets under contract, especially, we're in such a seller's market, everything's selling quickly anyway. You don't send out an email and it's already sold. So from like, once we get it under contract, everything else is on the phone, text messages, emails. You're really just a transaction coordinator at that point. You're just coordinating 4 people's schedules,
Absolutely.
your schedule, the buyer, the seller, and the closing attorney. So
Absolutely.
I get all that. And I don't have to go to a closing. I can sign it virtually. Like I get all that. But going back to the face-to-face, those 11 deals that you got under contract when you were first discovering this, those were all done face-to-face, right?
No, half were face to face, and the other half were from postcards. And when I say from postcards, I made a phone call versus going to the property. Because once I started going out there, I saw, hey, some of these properties are like 45 minutes away from my house or an hour away. So I started to figure out a better way to manage it. And that's why I started to say, hey, let me just call these people and see if that works. Let me use my phone skills. And that's what translated me into doing more virtual type of deals versus me doing the face-to-face deals. And I figured I'd make more money, be able to help more people if I spread out my business versus just me, one person doing all this stuff.
Well, Shaun, there's no doubt that even in Birmingham, traffic's nowhere near what obviously it is in Atlanta. I hate Atlanta just because of the traffic. But, I'm 2 hours away from Atlanta on a good day, on a good drive. But just being here in Birmingham, I remember I'm 45 minutes. I'm on the east side of town. I could be 45 minutes from an appointment. And then I'm going here and then I'm going there. I can only maybe run on 3 appointments because I spend at least an hour a day. I can only run on 3 or 4 appointments. And so I get that part of it, but speak specifically to the know, like, trust factor. How do you get over that hump? How do you get people to buy into you so that they sell them your property at a discounted rate?
If it's virtual, guys, developing rapport is huge. It's crucial and it cannot be skipped. You have to intently listen. You have to actively listen when you're engaging these sellers in the phone call. You have to literally be paying attention to every sound, every detail that's going on in the background. If they pause and stop for a second, say, hey, Shaun, hold on really quickly. My kids are running around in the background. And then they come back to the phone and then you just keep on. So tell them about your house. You've missed an opportunity to develop rapport, to develop that likability that Brian is talking about. That was an opportunity for you to dive right in and say, oh, you got children. How old are they? Man, I've got a nephew myself, or I've got a child myself. I mean, don't lie. Don't say you've got a kid if you don't, but you definitely want to touch on things that they give you. They're giving you ammunition to utilize. You just have to actively listen to utilize it.
Yeah, for sure. It seems to me like, so you were talking about direct mail, which is inbound marketing. You're sending mail out. People are calling you with a deal. So many times I talk to folks who are virtually wholesaling and they're cold calling, or their team is cold calling. Are you still, not to try to get off subject, because I want to come back to that with a specific question, but what are you doing for marketing and what do you suggest to your coaching students?
Great question. Great question, Brian. And I use a combination because I don't want anyone out there to feel like there is only one method that works. You have to try out what works for you in whichever market you are targeting, because different techniques or different marketing strategies will yield different results in different markets. So when it comes to sending out mail, we have cut down on sending out just mass amounts of mailers. We send that to targeted lists. So we have a driving for deals app that we utilize, and you can add team members to it. So when they go out and they put eyes on a specific property and they take that picture of it, yes, we send mailers to those because those are different. But we won't pull a list like we used to in the past of maybe 3, 4, 5,000 and send out 5,000 postcards. That can be highly expensive, and if you're not getting your return on your investment, you'll burn yourself and spend yourself out of business very quickly. So what we use is a combination. We use that direct mail method when it's very specific, but our bread and butter is cold calling. Cold calling is our bread and butter. We do lots of cold calling.
So that kind of leads me to my question. With inbound marketing, just really quickly, inbound marketing is where people are calling you. You've put some sort of advertising out there, whether it's a bandit sign or direct mail or radio, billboard, whatever it is, people are calling you. Outbound marketing is where you are kind of interrupting them. It's interruptive marketing. You're calling them, you're texting them, and so it is a lot easier to develop rapport with someone who has contacted you because they've essentially raised their hand saying, hey, I've got a property. But you just kind of interrupting people and doing the cold calling and the texting and things like that. There's a lot more rejection. It's a lot more difficult to develop rapport that way. Would you not agree? And what do you do to fight that?
Man, Brian, I agree 100%. I agree 100%. So the way that my team, the way that we navigate around that is I actually partnered up with the largest call center in the Philippines to be able to create my own virtual assistant company, because I needed someone on that front end to kind of take the brunt of those calls for me, to do the heavy lifting, to be the one that's on that front line, really getting abused somewhat by those sellers, because like Brian said, we're disrupting their day. We're reaching out to them out of the blue. And based upon that factor, a large percentage of people are not necessarily going to be happy about that. It's much different than folks who are getting your card and calling you because they wanted to. So as Brian said, that's something that you definitely have to consider and keep in mind. There are two different type of approaches, but you can still get over that hurdle by using a cold caller, so that when that call is teed over to you, it is somewhat of a warm lead, because you can say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you just spoke with Karen, my assistant, earlier today. I'm just following up with you on that. So that's a much more warmer approach than just calling out of the blue. Hey, I'm Shaun. You got a house you might want to sell? You definitely don't want to go that route and think that's going to last you a long time.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest keys to getting started, wholesaling in particular, but probably anything, there's so much rejection when it comes to cold calling in particular. And I like how you have like that first line of defense for they're doing a lot of the initial calling. And if someone kind of raises their hand, yeah, I might be interested. Well, great. Let's connect you with our whatever it might be, our acquisitions team, whatever it might be. I like that a lot better than, because this is the main reason. Confidence is so huge when you're first starting in real estate and in wholesaling in particular. And if you're out there and you're the one pounding those phones and you're the one getting rejected call after call after call after call, it can get you down very quick. Even the best of us, even the most driven people can get us down. So I like to, Shaun, I want to get your take on this. I like to get people wins, and I don't care if they're little wins, but we want to stack up those little wins so that we get confidence, because more confidence we have, the more excited we're going to be about continuing on this journey.
Absolutely, Brian. 100% agree. I mean, you got to have a confidence and enthusiasm going about our business, because there are going to be days when you're going to be beat down. There are going to be days when you have to overcome, the grueling task of repetitively going over the same things over and over. So that's why you must develop a system to remove yourself from that aspect of the business as soon as possible. However, I do suggest that you do go through that part before you remove yourself, so that you can truly have a respect for that position. You truly understand what it takes to get the job done and get that task accomplished for that role. How can you train someone if you don't know how to do it yourself? And I see that happen far too often. Sometimes people do remove themselves a little too soon, and they're just not knowing how to train that person who they've had hired to replace them. They don't know how to train them because they didn't know how to do it themselves.
Well, Shaun, I mean, everyone's not cut out to be a cold caller. Am I wrong?
You're right about that.
So you suggest, and I don't disagree with you here, but I would understand the other side of it. We need to have that. We need to gain that experience. We need to get the cuts, on our hands. We need to get develop those calluses. We need to get cussed out. We need to get the door slammed in our face. We need all those things. We need to stick our foot in our mouths. We need to not know the answers to lots of different questions that people might be asking of us as we're talking to them on the phone. That's the only way. That's the best way. I shouldn't say only. It's the best way to learn. You want to learn this business the fastest? You got to mess up. You have to. So I get that part of it. But I also understand the other side of it, Shaun, where not everybody's cut out to be a cold caller. But it sounds like to me, you force people to do that.
Yes. And let me tell you guys, you have to get over that fear. You've got to learn how to talk to people. I'm not sure what area of life that you can, be in, unless you're like a painter or something where you don't have to necessarily talk to people or be able to build relationships. Building relationships, just talking to people. That's all this is about, guys. I see far too often new folks that get started in our industry. They're intimidated because they're just like, I don't know what to say. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I always have to remind them that these are just regular folks selling their property. They're not necessarily savvy investors, and this is their 50th property they've sold. This might be their first property they've sold. So they're actually looking to you as the authority. So by you having confidence, as Brian mentioned earlier, that will put you in that position to be that authority that they're looking for, to get that confidence that you will need in order to get that transaction completed. Because again, these are folks that they've never met you. They have to trust you that you will be able to walk them through this transaction from beginning to the end.
No doubt about it. So Shaun, let's kind of talk to that person who hasn't done a deal yet. It sounds to me like you're suggesting cold calling right off the bat. You tell me, if somebody enters your coaching program, what do you get them started with? What's step one?
Step one is we get them cold calling. I mean, of course, we find a market that's going to be a viable source. We use different tools to figure out what's going on in that market. Are there transactions going on? Is this a market where it's going to be hard to find comps? You have to think about all of these different variables before you approach just doing business. You can't just say, you know what, I like Kansas because last summer when I went out there, my aunt's pie was so great. No, it has to be data that's driving you to want to do business in these particular markets. So once the market is determined and your lists are pulled, they're skip trace, they're put into some form of a dialer system, unless you're going to manually call those. And guys, gals out there, listen, I highly suggest, if you're a newbie, to invest in a dialer system, a multi-line dialer system that will allow you to get through a large number of calls in a short amount of time with less headache. You don't want to manually dial those. You want a system that's just repeatedly dialing and dialing and dialing for you. So that would be my first step, guys, is figure out where we're going to do business, get the list, get it skip traced, and get it into a dialer system so that you can start cold calling those, or either have someone that's going to cold call on your behalf and then tee those calls over to you again to get it closed out. But a dialer system, cold calling, pound those phones. You got to hit those phones, guys. There's no way around it, in my opinion.
And Shaun, and we're going to do this at the end, but Shaun does have 10 steps to closing your first deal. It's a free downloadable that he's going to direct you guys to towards when we're towards the end of the show. So when Shaun's sitting here talking about all these things that he wants you to do, these are things that are going to be here are the steps to closing your first deal. You got to do these things right here. So we're going to get to that, back to that in a minute. But you said something interesting a second ago. You said the first step is actually, let's pick a market, and we're going to pick a market based on data, we're not just going to pick something out of thin air or where the pies smell good. Pies smell good everywhere, don't they, Shaun?
Everywhere, man.
Thanksgiving's coming up. It's got me thinking about that.
Exactly.
But data, what data are we looking at, Shaun, when we're going to pick a market?
What we're looking at is closed sales, guys. We want to know what has closed in this market. What is we want to look for pockets of activity is what we're looking for. And I constitute activity as sold deals, because those are the only, that's all that matters. That's what we can use to comp our target property. If we go to a neighborhood and there's nothing that's been sold in a year or two within 5 miles, it's going to be very tough for you to justify your asking price for your property to your sellers, or for them to even want to invest and take that risk. So having data to drive your business it's huge. You can't go out there and just guess, or you'll spin your wheels.
Is that the only metric you look at, or is that just the main metric you look at? Because it seems like to me that the bigger markets are going to have more closed deals, and it would just be based on market size.
Indeed, that is true. But what we look at it is we take pockets. We'll take a piece of the city and we'll take sections of it at a time. So we won't just take, like, for instance, Atlanta and draw a line all around Atlanta and just say, okay, well, where's everything? I mean, there's lots of stuff going on in Atlanta, obviously. So we'll narrow it down. We'll see, well, where do we find the most activity? And there's a tool, guys, that's out there, List Source. There's a tool that's called List Source, and it'll literally allow you to find out where the highest producing zip codes in a particular city are. So if you do want to search for Atlanta, you can type in Atlanta, you put in particular metrics, and it'll pull all the zip codes that are and it'll allow you to list it from a ranked position. So zip code 30518 has 160 transactions in the past 30 days, and then so forth and so forth. So that way you can say, you know what, I'll target these 5 top zip codes to get started at first. So I can go an inch wide and a mile deep, versus saying I'll just blanket Atlanta and kind of be all over the place and never really get any penetration into any particular area of that city.
Right. What about the folks that are, maybe I've done a deal, maybe I've done a few deals, but I'm just struggling with consistency here, Shaun. And my marketing channel may be cold calling, but maybe something else, but I'm struggling with getting that consistency. Are there some things with your coaching students that maybe you've identified that, hey, they all kind of struggle in this area or this area when it comes to consistency?
Well, guys, to be consistent, you need systems in place. You need tried and true systems to accomplish these tasks for you on a repetitive, continuous basis. Things should be happening on your behalf and in spite of you, whether you're doing them or not. You need to have systems set up so that things are continuously happening. You got to have a good follow-up in place. Follow-up is the key, guys. I think follow-up is probably the most underrated word, 2 words that are used out there or underused, because it is the key. It's crucial. On average, guys, we don't close a deal. Our average touch for each deal close is 13 touches. So it takes us on average 13 contacts with one particular seller to translate that into a deal. Wow. So you have to understand that when you're starting off as a newbie or as someone who's even closed a deal or 2, I can guarantee you those deal or 2 that you probably closed, they were probably laydowns. And what do I mean by a laydown? They probably came on the first call or 2. And those will happen. I'd say every maybe 10 deals, once you start, being consistent, you'll get deals that just lay down. But for the most part, you want to approach it the way that I first suggested.
Shaun, I love both of those answers. Let's spend some time dissecting both of those things you just said, systems and follow-up, because both of those are going to be really key, follow-up in particular. But when it comes to systems, there could be a lot of different types of things. When I first got started, I remember, Joe McCall, we talked about him off line before we even got started, but Joe McCall was the first coach I ever paid money to back in 2012, 2013. And I remember that Joe used to tell me, make it to where your marketing is always, and I was doing direct mail when I first got started. That was my main thing, is just direct mail. But set up your direct mail to where it's done. Do it a quarter at a time, so 13 weeks at a time. Do it in 13-week increments, and have it done. It's going out every single week. Pay for it, get it set up, get the postcards done, get everything done, and that way, that marketing, that's a system. That's a system, and it's done. And I don't even have to think about my marketing going out because it's done.
Indeed.
So that's one system that takes away. That's one less thing I need to worry about is, did I get the marketing out this week? Or having to worry about my marketing budget. My marketing budget is done in one quarter advance at a time, and I've already paid for it. It's already done. So give me some other examples, Shaun, of systems that are really important for folks to be closing deals.
Well, first of all, I wanted to say, like, when I said that you have to have your marketing happening for you in spite of you, I took that from Joe. So that's crazy that you mentioned that from Joe, because that's literally where I got that from. You have to have your marketing; it has to continuously be going. You can't sometimes do it and see what's going to happen when it comes to marketing for your deals. It has to continuously be going, guys, and you have to know that it's a competitive space. I don't look at folks as competition. I look at opportunities to collaborate, but we have to still be realistic. There are a lot of folks that are trying to do what you're doing. So you have to set yourself apart from those people by having the systems in place that when you do, how do you follow up? What's going to happen after you call someone? What's the next step? You've got to have something in place. You got to have a follow-up task. You got to have a text message that goes out. And these things have to happen automatically. You have to have things in place that are just automatically going at least 10 steps down the line. Like Brian mentioned, you got to figure out what's your start and what is your cutoff. You can't just hit everyone consistently. But honestly, that is for us. We have a 10-day sort of deal. Once we make contact, we will hit them for 10 days consistently until they say, leave me the heck alone. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you have to be consistent. And even during that 10-day period, if they haven't told us to leave them alone, we still have a follow-up that's based upon that system. Now something else kicks in. And like Brian mentioned, these are systems. It's a system. No one has to think about it. No one has to say, oh man, did we hit that button? It's already built and done. So as soon as you guys can develop systems, that will be the key to your sustainability and your ability to scale and grow your wholesaling business.
So we're talking about virtual wholesaling specifically here. Shaun, what is not, what in think about all the different things that we do in a wholesaling business or in a virtual wholesaling business. We've got our marketing, which could be people calling, people going on appointments. You don't go on appointments, but you sending contracts, sending over someone who's a transaction coordinator who's doing all that stuff, all the different hats that people might wear or a system might wear. Of all the things that there could be, what needs you? What requires you, the operator, Shaun, to be there just as an overseer? That's it? Is there anything else? Everything else can be systematized, can it not?
Absolutely. Everything can be systematized, but as something that me and Brian talked about offline as well, you've got to understand your KPIs, your key performance indicators. You want to understand your numbers. You want to understand how many leads does it take you to get a deal? How many calls does it take to get a lead? How many calls does it take to translate into a lead? So that way you can say, okay, well, you know what? It takes us, for my team, it takes 200 calls to get a lead. So we've got to make at least this amount of calls per day, 600 calls a day from one VA to pull out 3 leads. That's how you measure, guys. You want to know what's happening in all areas of your business. And you measure that through key performance indicators.
Yeah. I couldn't have said that better. It's so huge to understand what the metrics are, to be tracking them, and to be able to see this in real time, daily, weekly, monthly. You want to be able to see all this stuff so that you have wholesaling. I know so many people who have wholesaling businesses. And when I say businesses, that means they can literally do their business from a cell phone and looking at their laptop from anywhere. They could be anywhere, and they don't even necessarily need to be doing that every single day. And wholesaling is one of those things to where once you get these processes in place, you can actually have a sustainable business that has consistency. I love that, Shaun. I want to touch on follow-up, though. You've mentioned it a couple of times, and the fortune's in the follow-up, right? The follow-up is vital. Just like Shaun got done saying that I never called it a laydown before, but you don't get many of those. I remember when I was tracking this stuff and I was hardcore wholesaling here in Birmingham, over 75% of our deals, it sounds like it's more for maybe virtual, sounds like it might be more for cold calling, but over 75% of my deals were done through follow-up. And this is when I was going on appointments and meeting with people face-to-face. I didn't get the contract every time. And when you're cold calling, Shaun, you can talk to this point more than I can. I never really did that. But how often do you call someone and they're ready to sign a contract, It doesn't even sound to me like your system's even set up that way, because it sounds to me like it's set up in a way to where if they're even interested, it goes to somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the way that it works, and great question, the way that it works is again, like after 10 days of making contact, we'll have an acquisitions guy, which is someone who tries to go out and get that deal under contract. We'll have an acquisitions person reach out to that seller right away to develop contact and to see about moving that deal forward. For whatever reason, if we're not able to make contact, that's when the automated systems go into place to keep reaching out to that person until we make contact. Now, let's say my acquisitions guy does make contact, maybe on the third attempt, and they get physical contact and they speak with that seller, and that seller says, hey, you know what, Mr. Acquisitions guy, this sounds great, and I'm willing to do business with you, but I can't sell my house until 2 months from now when my daughter comes back from her vacation. There will be variable reasons why you have to follow up. And if they say to call back in a month and a half, we're calling back in 3 weeks. We're going to call back right in the middle of that, because it's a follow-up. And that's something that we teach as well. Hey, Mr. Seller, this is Shaun. Remember we spoke a few weeks back. You told me to follow up with you about your property. They're not going to say, no, I said, give it 3. I've never had no one say that. So my point is you want to stay on top of these deals and by setting tasks, follow-up tasks. If you don't, I promise you what's going to happen is you're going to say, oh man, I forgot about that guy out in wherever he is. And he wanted me to follow back up with him in 3 months. And this is 3.5 months, and you look back and you go look up that deal, and you go look it up on your sources, and you see that it's been sold 2 or 3 weeks ago. When that only has to happen to you 1 or 2 or 3 times before you say, you know what, I'm not going to be missing out on these opportunities anymore. Yeah. And you will ensure that follow-up again is happening for you in spite of you. It has to be there. You have to follow up. Like Brian said, I would say 80 to 85% of our deals come from follow-up. We don't get a large percent of our deals on that first or second call. That's just not the expectation that should be out there for you.
Shaun, do you recommend, as we wrap up here, do you recommend folks who are brand new to get all these systems set up first, or should they just go out there and start trying to make things happen with a little bit of hustle, driving for dollars and things like that?
Great question, Brian. Great question. If I would say it depends on this. Where are you at financially? Do you financially have the budget to invest in some of these tools? Excuse me. Do you financially have the budget to invest in some of these tools? Or are you kind of financially strapped where you just kind of have to make it happen? And I think both are you can have success doing both. But if you have the means to start building your systems up front, build them up front. Build your business the right way up front so that you're not having to undo things so drastically once you figure out, oh my gosh, I've been doing it the total wrong way. You won't have to unwind and redo so much of it. So having those systems in place will allow you to measure things because it's a system. You can oversee what's going on in your system to make adjustments a lot more easier than if you're just pulling things together and trying to make it work. I hope that makes sense.
For sure. Shaun Young, virtual wholesaling coach. Where can people go to get the 10 steps to closing your first deal? Because that sounds like something, if I'm getting started, I need this 10 steps to closing my first deal.
You need it, guys. Head on over to ShaunYoungCoaches.com. That's ShaunYoung coaches.com, guys, and get that free download and take advantage, guys. Trust me, it's not as complicated as it may seem once you start taking action. You can't wait for all the lights between here and your goal to be green. Once that first light turns green, you hit go and have faith that when you get to that next light, it'll reveal itself to you, whether it's yellow, red, or green. You'll know what to do when you get to that next light, but don't look 8 lights ahead and wanting them all to be green before you start taking action. Fail your way forward, guys.
ShaunYoungCoaches.com. We're going to put that link in the description and in the show notes. Guys, head on over to Shaun Young Coaches. That's SHAUN, ShaunYoungCoaches.com. And also, if you like some of the things that Shaun has said today, they kind of resonate with you, click that thing right there on the homepage. As soon as you go to that website, schedule a call today with Shaun. Mr. Young, I appreciate you, sir. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Brian, it has been a blast, my friend. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak to your viewers and your listeners. Anything you need from me, brother, I'm here for you. And I'm looking forward to making great things happen with you in the future.
Appreciate it, Shaun. Guys, we love you so much. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. We want to see you back here next time for another episode of the REI Live podcast. We love you. We're going to see you next time.